Shri Mahaganadhipataye Namaha. Salutations to all. Now I'm going to give a small overview on the impact of the annual solar eclipse, which is happening on the June-10th, 2021, this Thursday. So if we look at where the eclipse is visible, it's visible through most of the northern Asia. Also, it's visible all over through Europe, like most of the countries, as well as in UK, and in Greenland, Canada, and most parts in the northeastern USA, as well as Alaska. And this particular annual solar eclipse is not at all visible throughout the whole of India. So whoever is residing in India, they do not have to follow any particular rituals or customs or any principles for this. They can ignore this solar eclipse. If we look at some of the main cities or some of the prominent cities where the eclipse is visible, you can see that in Toronto, Canada, it's not visible at the beginning, but at 5:40 a.m. you can see the maximum of the solar eclipse, as well as it's ending at 6:37 a.m. And in New York City, it's not visible at the beginning as well, because it's like occurring almost at the time of the sunrise. So you can just see the maximum at 5:32 a.m. and the ending is at 6:30 a.m. And in Washington DC as well, since it's around sunrise, you cannot see the beginning of the eclipse, and the maximum of the eclipse is at 5:47 a.m. and it ends at 6:29 a.m. But for London, UK, you can see that it's happening around afternoon. So it's like 10:08 a.m. it's the beginning, and the maximum is at 11:13 a.m. and it's ending at 12:22. And in Frankfurt, Germany, it starts at 11:27 a.m. The maximum is at 12:25 p.m. and it's ending at 1:27 p.m. And in Moscow, it starts at 1:22 p.m. The maximum is at 2:26 p.m. and it ends at 3:27 p.m. And at Beijing, China, it's starting at 7:29 p.m. The maximum is at 7:35 p.m. and you cannot see the ending because it's like after the sunset. The visibility is around the sunset and the ending is after the sunset, so it's not at all visible. And as I said earlier, this eclipse is not at all visible in India, so whoever is residing in India or Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, Bangladesh, since it's not at all visible, they do not have to follow any particular rituals or customs for this solar eclipse. They can just ignore this eclipse, because as per the Hindu scriptures, all the rituals and procedures there are to be followed only if that particular eclipse is visible in your location. If it's not, you can just ignore that eclipse. And if we look at the path of how the eclipse is happening, so this is taken from timeanddate.com. It's a very good website and it's highly reliable as well. It has some good astronomical data. It shows you some reliable data of how the eclipse is happening, and it also picturizes as a global map. So over these regions where we are, like the northeastern of USA and Canada, Alaska, or Greenland, here the eclipse starts around sunrise, and in the mid parts like over UK and the Europe as well, it's almost at the afternoon time. But if you go to Far East Russia, China, Mongolia, it's like around sunset time when the eclipse occurs. So, and this dark path is where you can see the annularity of the eclipse. Like, so the solar eclipse tends to be in the form of a disk, so you can see like a complete solar eclipse in this dark region. And in the places where the darkness is decreasing, the way you see the eclipse also starts to decrease. And if you want to see as a global 3D map, this is the path of the eclipse. So over the eastern regions, the eclipse is almost during the sunset time. In the mid regions, it's like around midday. And in the west, like over Canada and those surrounding places, it's like around sunrise time. So this eclipse is actually happening in the Rohini and Mrigasira nakshatras. They're as per the Vedic astrology, and it's also in Vrishabha Rasi. You can say it as Taurus, the zodiac sign. So those who are born in the Rohini or Mrigasira nakshatras and also as well in the Vrishabha Rasi, they should not see the eclipse, and also they have to do any mantra japa during the time of the eclipse. So it's advised for those people born on those constellation or the stars, it's advised not to see the eclipse and also to do some meditation or prayers during that time. And so during the eclipse, since it's happening in Taurus with the north node of the moon, you can call it as a dragon head, it's Rahu. So for the Sankalpa, you have to say Rahu Grasta Suryo Paraga Samaye. And you can do any mantra japa you like, which you're initiated into, and or you can do any sacred chantings. Like if you are not initiated into anything and if you still like doing some sort of any sacred recitations, so here I have taken down some simple forms which can be used by all. So it's Shivaya Gurave Namaha. You say that Shivaya Gurave Namaha. So during the time of the eclipse, you can just keep on repeating this sacred chanting. So just give some divine nature in you. Or some other one like which is called as Sarva Gayatri is the second one. Om Sarva Chaitanya Rupam Tam Adyam Vidyam Cha Dhimahi Buddhim Yanah Prachodayat. So I'm just repeating it again. Om Sarva Chaitanya Rupam Tam Adyam Vidyam Cha Dhimahi Buddhim Yanah Prachodayat. So this is called as a Sarva Gayatri. It's the first verse of the Hindu sacred scriptures, the Devi Puranam, or you can say it as Devi Bhagavatam. It's one of the 18 Puranas in the Vedic scriptures. This is the first verse, and this is very powerful verse. So many people recite it daily to get the divine blessings or to get the divine knowledge of the omnipresence and also to understand the omnipresence. It's not that you have to do only these two, but if you like, you can do any other thing as you want, or if you do not want to do any recitation, you can just do meditation as well. So doing meditation during the time of the eclipse is also very powerful. So if you are used to doing meditation, I advise you do some sort of meditation, or if not, you can do any sort of some mantra japa or sacred chanting. And if you want to find out the time like of the eclipse, which is not in the cities which I just listed, you can look in through the timeanddate.com. So it just gives you a precise listings of when and at what time it's going to occur in your particular location. And so during the eclipse, it is also good to do any charity or give any donations to the needy, or you can give to a good Brahmin who is following a good spiritual life, who works in a temple, who's leading a sattvic life as well. So as for this solar eclipse, it's advised to give a donation of a silver moon idol. It doesn't have to be of any particular size or weight. It just depends upon your financial capacity or capability. And also a silver serpent idol, a silver sun idol. And if you're not much interested in doing these, you can give a donation of some rice or a white cloth to the people in need, or pearl or a copper bronze bell, some sesame seeds or kyawar ghee butter, as well as some urad goda, or it's called as black gram. I guess I forgot to write the gram over there. So it's just advised as per the Vedic scriptures to donate or give these in charity to those in need. Also, so can we see the solar eclipse? As for the ancestral tradition, many people say we shouldn't see the solar eclipse because during the solar eclipse, the sun's rays are very powerful. So if you just see with the naked eye, it's pretty harmful, and it gives you a long-lasting negative impact to the eyes, and it might cause you a headache to last over a lifetime. So it's better advised not to see a solar eclipse. But during these days, we have some good technology. We were able to manufacture some good type of spectacles which are designed with a good lens to see a solar eclipse. So if you have a solar glasses which is protected and which is good enough to watch a solar eclipse, then it's okay to see a solar eclipse. Because even in ancient days, the Indian astronomers, they used to see an eclipse using a mirror, and to the like a glass, they used to um, dust it with some black powder, so it just reduces the impact of the sun's rays. And using that, they used to see a solar eclipse, because any astronomer should observe a solar eclipse or lunar eclipse, because he has to compare the time of the eclipse which he calculated, as well as the maximum eclipse time and the duration of the eclipse, and he has to tally his calculations with the practical observation. So most of the astronomers used to see the eclipse, but the common man would not see it, because they're not like they do not have the resources or the facilities to see it. But during these days, we do have some good technology, good sort of spectacles to see an eclipse. So if you have those, then you can protect your eyes. Also, the solar eclipse and impact on temple schedules. So during a total solar eclipse, or even if it's a partial eclipse in your region, and if you have a temple in that region, the temple is not to be open that day. So since it's happening on Thursday, so if you have an eclipse on Thursday morning, like during the sunrise time to like around 10 a.m., you shouldn't open the temple on that morning. So before like the Wednesday evening, you can do all the regular rituals or practices which you do, and you can close the temple. You shouldn't open it on Thursday morning. You have to open it after the eclipse ends, and then you have to clean the whole temple and then start doing all the other rituals. And if it's at midday, you have to close the temple before the start of the eclipse. And if the eclipse is happening at evening in your location, so you have to shut down the temple like around post afternoon. Once you give the naivedya to the deities, then you have to close the temples, and it's to be open the next day. And also during the solar eclipse, it's as per the tradition and as per the advice of the scriptures, it's good that you do a bath. You take a bath before the start of the eclipse, and then during the time of the eclipse, like during the total duration of the eclipse, that time you do either some meditation or some prayer or some japa. And once the eclipse is over, then you take a bath after the end of the eclipse. And also the ancestral rites, or you call it as abdikam, or the death anniversary ritual as per the Vedic things. So those who have the ancestral rites which are to be performed on June 10, 2021. So if the eclipse is in the morning in your location, then once the eclipse is done, then you can just take a bath and then do the death anniversary rituals. But if the eclipse is during midday or during the evening, you have to wait until the eclipse is over. So once the eclipse is over, then you can start your ancestral ritual programs, and you can finish off all those things after the eclipse. And also the principles to follow during a solar eclipse are like, generally once the solar eclipse is there, before the solar eclipse for like 4 hours you shouldn't have any food. So many more modern people might not believe this, but it does do have some sort of impact on our digestive system. And as per the scriptures, it says that like all the microorganisms are, some are active and some are inactive during this time. So since it has a lot of negative impact during that time, it's advised not to take any food. And also before the start of the eclipse, like before 3 hours itself, you should take any food which you want to take. And also during the time of the eclipse, to protect any cooked food which you have, generally the procedure we follow is we take a kusha grass, it's called as darbha. So we take that kusha grass and keep a small piece of it in the cooked food which we have, so that the food is preserved. But I advise to follow that, but it depends on the place you're in and the availability of the resources which you have. But I strictly advise that you do not take any food during the time of the eclipse. And once the eclipse is over, you can take a bath and then you can have some food for kids or women or for anybody. And also the pregnant women like who have conceived and who are carrying, they shouldn't see an eclipse because so their womb is very sensitive, and the solar rays which come during the eclipse time, they have a very negative impact on the newborn baby. So those who are pregnant, who are carrying, so they shouldn't see a eclipse at all. It's strictly not at all advised. And so if we look at the global impact of the solar eclipse happening, as per the source which I cited over here, it's Brihat Samhita. It's a very good book written by Varahamihira around 5th century AD, but some say it's around 1st century BCE as well. And using that book, it's a very good book on mundane astrology. If anybody's interested in mundane astrology, they can have a look over that book. And so if we have a solar eclipse which is occurring during a sunrise or sunset time, it says that the impact is loss of winter crops, and so it means the winter crops, the crop might not be fully profitable, so the yield might be pretty bad. Also the kings in those places, though we do not have any kings in the present times, we can say it as the politicians or the local leaders in those places, they will get into some troubles. They might have some bad time governing, or they might have to face some huge difficult situations, so they have to be careful and be prepared. Also there will be some scarcity of resources in those regions. So if we observe at the map which we have, so we can see that over this region, like during upper Michigan, or you can say in the Canada over these places, or New York or Washington DC, so like all over this particular region, the eclipse is occurring during the sunrise time. And if you observe over the far right side, like on the eastern Russia, as well as the northeastern China and Mongolia as well. So in these regions, it's happening around sunset time. So this far east regions and the far left regions, so this is where it's happening during a sunrise or sunset time. So these places, I advise the administration to be careful and be alert over the next 6 months. Because of this eclipse, we can say the impact might last from 6 months to 1 year. So they have to foresee, since the winter crops might be at stake, they have to see whether or not do they have available resources over those regions to distribute. And also during the administration and socio-public issues, they have to be pretty much cautious how they can handle those situations. So if we look at the other things, the eclipse is happening in Vrishabha Rasi, or you say Taurus. So since it's happening in Taurus, the shepherds, the cattle, or people who own the cattle, they might be into some troubled situations where the cattle might not give you the expected outcome, or they might experience some unknown diseases or some new diseases. So you have to take care of their health. Make sure you take care of their health in advance. Do not delay any of such situations. And also those men like who are pretty famous in those places, in all the regions where the eclipse is happening, who reside in those areas as their locality, and who are native and reside in those places, and those who are famous or like socially well known, they might have to face some sort of social issues or in their career. So they have to be a little careful and be patient, and also be a little broad thinking on whatever they are doing. Also, the solar and lunar eclipses is happening in the same month. So if you do observe, we just had a lunar eclipse in a couple days, like several days ago, and we're having a solar eclipse now. and these both eclipses are happening in the same month. So here in the same month, in the sense it might not be the same English calendar month, but if you look at the luni solar calendar, which is followed in India, or which the Hinduism or the Vedic calendar typically follows, since they're happening in the same months. So in the same month we do have like two eclipses, the solar and the lunar. So which means that the kings will suffer destruction through the open rebellion of their army, trouble, bloodshed, and agony. So how you can understand this is, so there will be a lot of political instability and a lot of administration sort of issues happening in those regions. So all the regions which we just saw in the map, all those regions, the political situation or the social public situation might be a little bad in the coming 6 months, so they have to be a bit careful. So the government or the political leaders, I advise them to be well in advance thinking, have some good intelligence, and foresee the issues which might occur. And also they should be very careful with the army and policemen and make sure they do not stress them too much during this type of corona type of situations, so they do not see any sort of rebellions happening over there. Also the public might be a bit too disturbed, and also there might be some agony. So I advise them to try to make sure like you try to foresee the events well in advance and try to take the measures which are needed for your situations. So if we just look at the eclipse map once again, as I said, this is taken from
ఈ వీడియో గనుక మీకు నచ్చినట్లయితే లైక్ చేయండి, షేర్ చేయండి, సబ్స్క్రైబ్ చేయడం మాత్రం మర్చిపోకండి. మా వీడియో నోటిఫికేషన్స్ మీకు రావాలంటే బెల్ ఐకాన్ ని క్లిక్ చేయండి.